Have you heard about lost signals?
Oh, man.
Because honestly, I've been waiting to talk about this deep dive all week.
Yeah, same here. It's just such a cool concept.
It really is. So to give you listening a quick vibe check, just picture this, right? It is the year 2089.
Right.
And you're walking through the dried up mud of what used to be the southern United States. But the trees around you, they're just wrong.
So wrong. They look like cedars, but they're metal.
Exactly. The bark is this rusted, warped metal. And the sky is just choking on ash. Plus there's this violent purple static crackling in the air.
Yeah, that visual is just wild.
It is. It's this breathtaking collision. Imagine if the beautiful, overgrown natural reclamation of The Last of Us just violently crashed into the gritty Soviet-era industrial rust of Metro or Stalker.
That is exactly the vibe. It is profoundly haunting. The environment feels so heavy, you can almost smell the rust and the ozone, just from the visual design alone. Seriously. And so our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack all of this. We're getting into the lore, the world building, the really brutal gameplay mechanics of lost signals.
Because it does something that is, frankly, incredibly rare in survival games.
Oh, 100%.
It makes the world itself the primary antagonist. Not just the enemies, but the actual world.
Right. And the way it handles technology is fascinating to me. When we say it's set in the future, we are absolutely not talking about sleek holograms or force fields or, touchscreen stuff.
No, not at all.
The aesthetic is so heavily retrofuturistic.
Very much so. The tech you interact with is aggressively analog.
Yes.
We are talking CRT screens with dead pixels, chunky physical knobs that take actual effort to turn, thick cables just snaking through the mud.
Yeah, there's no Wi-Fi here.
Exactly. Wireless technology basically does not exist in this vision of 2089. Everything is just a persistent, heavy relic of a world that failed decades ago, which is so cool. I was actually trying to figure out how to describe the feeling of this tech, and the best way I can picture it is, well, think of the Erebus network.
The dead system powering everything.
Right. Think of Erebus like a massive string of Christmas lights. But instead of light bulbs, the bulbs are quantum computers.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Thanks. So when the worlds fell apart, the wire got severed. The electricity didn't just stop flowing, it violently bled out into the surrounding room.
Yeah, it ruptured.
Exactly. And that bleed is the static. So the devices you use to tap into it, it's like wandering through a nuclear wasteland and finding this heavy, indestructible 1980s cassette player.
Yes.
It's clunky, it's a massive physical burden to lug around, but it is literally the only thing capable of reading that raw bleeding signal.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Mechanically, what you're describing is the core concept of the signal nodes in the game. Originally, Erebus was this quantum military grid built in the 2020s designed to process data at a subatomic level. But when society collapsed, it didn't power down. It just, like you said, it ruptured.
It broke reality a little bit.
Basically, yeah. And the signal nodes are these clunky relics left over from that era. They emit this eerie violet glow. They're basically the failing heart valves of the Erebus network.
And that rupture isn't just like a neat visual effect on your screen.
Yeah.
It has a physical impact on the game world, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The environment is constantly experiencing deep, uneven tremors known as the Lowlands pulse.
Which is so creepy.
It really is. And it's not an earthquake. It is the physical manifestation of the Erebus core failing, which generates this ancient frequency called the resonance.
Right.
It communicates to the player that the world isn't just ruined on the surface, it is fundamentally breaking down at a quantum level.
Yeah, like the static we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The static acts like a highly volatile form of radiation. It corrupts organic matter. It tears localized holes in reality.
Which, naturally, leads to the big question. Like, what kind of human being can actually survive in an environment that is actively unraveling like that?
Yeah, it requires someone who has been fundamentally shaped by that exact trauma.
Enter Ryley Kastner.
Exactly, Ryley Kastner. He is a 37-year-old drifter, just completely physically and psychologically scarred.
I was reading up on his backstory, specifically the stuff about Hollow Point. That seems to be the main anchor for his whole character arc.
Oh, Hollow Point is the defining nightmare of Riley's life.
Yeah.
It used to be this rare, beautiful, cedar-lined refuge in the Lowlands. But when he was 18, it was discovered by the Nodeborn.
Those are the static worshipping cultists, right?
Right. But they aren't just mindless zealots.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they worship the static because the quantum rupture actually trapped echoes of human voices, data, and memories inside the frequency.
Oh, wow.
So to the Nodeborn, the static is divine revelation. They literally believe they are hearing the voices of gods.
That is terrifying.
So they burned Hollow Point to the ground to, quote-unquote, purify it. And Ryley only survived because an elder named Ida sacrificed herself. She shoved him into the shadows and left him with nothing but her hunting knife.
Just brutal. And he also loses his closest friend, Jace Kellen, during all that chaos, too.
Yeah.
Because they had all these plans to escape together, right? They get separated, and then years later, when they finally cross paths again in the Lowlands, Jace actually betrays him just to save himself.
Yeah, that betrayal cuts incredibly deep because Ryley is already so isolated. But we also have to talk about the physical toll the world has taken on him, specifically the hum.
Oh man, this detail blew my mind, because I was wondering, if the static acts like radiation, how does Ryley survive constantly being exposed to it without just mutating into a metal tree?
Right, it comes down to a really tragic genetic inheritance. Ryley is actually a descendant of Mara Varen.
One of the original architects of the network.
Exactly, and she died decades earlier from severe static corruption. Her exposure was so intense that it altered the iron in her bloodstream, essentially turning her circulatory system into a biological antenna.
That is so messed up.
Right, and Ryley inherited that altered DNA. He literally has a static hum in his blood.
It's horrifying, but it's also a survival tool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a total double-edged sword. On one hand, it guides him to active signal nodes and warns him when a threat is near.
Right.
But on the other hand, it is constant psychological torture. Because the network recorded Mara's final moments, Ryley constantly hears his ancestor's static-laced voice whispering in his head.
Just telling him to keep going.
Yeah.
That level of sensory overload has to be exhausting. And just when the game gives you a glimmer of hope with a companion, it rips it away. Talk about Lyra here.
Oh, Lyra. She is definitely the emotional core of the early game.
She is this wiry, fiercely optimistic survivor, right? She teams up with Ryley and even weaves him this frayed grass ring as a physical reminder to hold on to his humanity.
Yeah, it's a really sweet detail.
And then, during a routine scavenging run, the game introduces the reality of a bleed shadow rift.
Which is, mechanically speaking, what happens when the corrupted network entirely fractures space-time in a localized area. The laws of physics just collapse.
Yeah, it looks like a terrifying violet gash in the air.
Right.
And Lyra gets dragged directly into one. The game makes you think she's dead, which is already awful.
But the twist later on.
Oh, the twist. When she returns as a signal wraith, her mind is completely shattered by the static void, her physical form is corrupted, and you literally have to fight the twisted remnants of your only friend.
Yeah.
It made me completely reevaluate the story. Like, is Ryley actually trying to save the Lowlands? Or is he just a broken man desperately running from the guilt of Hollow Point and the trauma of losing Lyra?
I mean, that tension is entirely intentional by the developers. Ryley is not your traditional video game savior.
Not at all.
He's a traumatized survivor who cannot outrun his ghosts. And the brilliance of Lost Signals is that this tragedy isn't just flavor text, it's the actual engine for how the game plays.
Yes.
The developers translated that emotional weight directly into the psychological endurance system.
Okay, let's unpack this system.
Yeah.
Because I have never seen a game treat mental health like a literal survival mechanic before. It sounds incredibly stressful.
It really is, because Ryley is continuously exposed to raw, static, deep isolation and just the ambient horror of the world his mind actively frays in real time.
Right.
But it's not just a meter filling up on your screen. The psychological strain dictates your physical reality in the game.
The symptoms are terrifying.
Yeah.
If your endurance drops too low, the game literally starts lying to you.
Oh, yeah.
You begin seeing dark shadow flickers in your peripheral vision. The audio design changes, so you hear Mara's fading voice, or even worse, you hear Lyra weeping in the distance.
And you experience false encounters. You might be creeping through an abandoned rail yard, you see a silhouette of an enemy sniper, you waste your precious ammo firing at it, only to realize there was absolutely nothing there.
Which is devastating when ammo is so scarce.
Yeah.
But the absolute most brutal mechanic has to be the combat flinch.
Oh, the flinch?
Picture this. You are in a desperate firefight. You're hiding behind a rusted-out truck. A mutated wraith is sprinting right at you. You line up the perfect shot, pull the trigger.
And he lowers the gun.
He literally flinches. His hands are shaking so badly from shot nerves that he fails to fire.
it creates such a profound sense of empathy for the character. You aren't just managing a health bar or a stamina wheel, you know.
Right.
You are actively managing a human being's breaking point. And you can't just drink a health potion to fix it. You have to rely on specific grounding mechanisms.
Like the Soul Saver device.
Yes, the Soul Saver is this rare prototype forearm sleeve left over from the Erebus scientists. It emits a counter frequency that temporarily stabilizes Ryley's mind against the static.
But the batteries for it are super scarce, right?
Incredibly scarce. So your main grounding factors end up being your companions.
Right. Characters like Avani the Believer or Dane the Outcast.
Exactly. Traveling with them actually reduces Ryley's psychological strain. Like with Avani, her deep spiritual belief acts as an emotional anchor.
They talk to him around the fire, pull him back to reality.
Right, but the stakes are high, because if you make a tactical error and your companion dies, they are gone permanently.
Permadeath.
Yeah, and you lose that psychological anchor for the rest of the game.
Man, the isolation would become unbearable. And while Ryley is battling his inner demons just to aim a gun straight, the rest of the Lowlands is locked in a massive physical war.
Oh yeah, a huge war.
Because there's only about 10 to 15,000 signal nodes still functioning out of the original 50,000. So there's this brutal scramble for control. Who is actually fighting over this dying grid?
Well, there are three main factions, and each represents a radically different ideology of survival. First, you have the Wolfpack. They're the ex-military remnants controlling the northern wastes. Their philosophy is basically the fascism of survival. They believe in total control and absolute order.
Right, and then you have the Ashborn Collective, who are basically the polar opposite.
Exactly. The Ashborn are lowland scavengers born from the dust of the collapse. They live in these ramshackle camps made of tents and rusted vehicles.
Yeah.
They are chaotic, spiritual, desperate. This is actually the faction that houses the node-born cultists. They don't want to control the static, they want to integrate with it.
And finally, there is the Primacy one. And these guys are fascinating to me. They are the pre-war elite, right?
Yep.
Corporate schemers, politicians, who retreated into these massive, heavily fortified bunkers under the Iron Eagle Cliffs way back in 2042. But wait, something isn't adding up for me here.
What's that?
If the Primacy one has all the pre-war technology, pristine bunkers, all the archives, why are they hiding? They should have easily wiped out the Wolfpack and the Ashborn by now.
That is a really logical question, and the lore provides a great answer.
Okay.
The Primacy one are paralyzed by their own paranoia. Because they sealed themselves in an echo chamber for decades, they essentially rotted from the inside out.
Oh, wow.
They spent years analyzing old architect logs from the 1980s, and they actually misread a dire warning about the network as a prophecy of their own eventual dominance.
That is so ironic.
Right. Their ranks are thinning from inbreeding and disease, their rigged nodes are failing, and their leadership is so terrified of losing what little control they have left that they refuse to launch a full-scale offensive.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. They're victims of their own isolation.
Exactly.
And the dynamic territory system makes interacting with these factions so compelling too, because the map isn't static.
No, it changes based on what you do.
The ethical weight of your choices fundamentally alters the environment. Like, if you clear out a corrupt node and hand the territory over to the Wolfpack, you return later to find it fortified with razor wire, steel barricades, and heavy patrols.
You gave them security, but you also enabled their authoritarianism.
Yes. Conversely, if you give that exact same node to the Ashborn, they gut the surrounding infrastructure to rubble. It becomes a scorched earth camp filled with feral, mutated beasts.
Right, you gave power to the desperate, but you unleashed chaos. You're actively shaping the geopolitical landscape.
And all of this bloodshed, all the faction wars, the scramble for territory, it all revolves around a central myth that turns out to be very real.
The ultimate endgame choice left behind by the architects of Erebus.
The twin Keystones. This is where the story shifts from mere survival to, like, a grand, almost cosmic scale.
Right, so back in 2018, when the architects realized the world was going to inevitably collapse, they forged these two massive quantum keys.
But they weren't designed to save everyone, which is the darkest part. They were designed as a brutal test to see if humanity was even worthy of continuing.
Yeah, the architects were scientists who basically lost their humanity in the pursuit of pure logic. They viewed empathy as a flaw and raw resilience as a feature.
Is this cool?
They believed that only those smart enough to decode the ciphers and ruthless enough to survive the Lowlands could be trusted with the future of the human race. They didn't view it as playing God. They viewed it as a necessary evolutionary filter.
The hubris of that is just astounding. It feels like a terrifying reflection of like modern tech bro arrogance.
Oh, absolutely.
This idea that a handful of isolated elites get to define what makes humanity worthy while billions of innocent people just burn. So what actually are the two Keystones?
The first is B11, known as the True Keystone. It represents a path called the Ember Thread. It's hidden deep in the frozen north.
Okay.
And if you can secure B11, it holds the potential to unlock a subterranean facility called Eden's Reach and launch the Arclight.
Which is the Ark ship.
Right, a massive, intact Ark ship designed to carry 1,500 people off-world to start over.
But then there's L14, the false keystone, the trap,
Yes.
known as the Ash.
Ooh. It's located far in the south of the Yapana Relay. The architects built it to weed out the greedy or the careless. If a player is tricked into activating L14, it triggers a catastrophic event.
A literally world-ending event.
It unleashes a cosmic force called the Aemon Ghost and awakens an ancient, ravenous quantum threat known as the Vaymaw. Activating L14 literally rips open massive bleed shadow rifts across the entire map, plunging the world into a permanent living nightmare.
So the stakes couldn't possibly be higher.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the actual gameplay. Like, how do you survive long enough to navigate this nightmare, assuming you don't have access to, plasma rifles and energy shields?
Well, you don't. The combat in Lost Signals is intentionally oppressive. It's raw, it's weighty, it's desperate.
Yeah.
The developers definitely did not want you feeling like a super soldier.
I mean, the weapons alone tell a story. You are swinging chipped machetes, rusted crowbars, blunt tire irons.
Yeah, you're scrounging.
If you're incredibly lucky, you might find a firearm. But it's going to be like a duct-taped, sawn-off shotgun or a jury-rigged 19th century revolver with a cracked wooden grip, and they degrade over time.
That's the kicker.
Every time you pull the trigger, there's a chance the weapon misfires or just breaks.
Which means every single bullet is a massive resource, and every firefight is a calculated risk. And that ties perfectly into the logic of scavenging.
Right.
In most games, you just open a random wooden crate and find a health potion. In Lost Signals, the loot is deeply integrated into the world's logic. You have to actually learn how to read the environment.
That was one of my favorite details. If you need Aethrin shards, which are these highly volatile crystallized fragments of quantum energy you use for crafting, you can't just find them in a random building.
No, you have to take a massive risk.
You have to venture near the active wraith zones, because the shards are a byproduct of the bleed shadow rifts.
And if you need ammunition, you have to track down old pre-war police barricades or ruined Arubis security stations.
It makes so much sense.
And the world-integrated puzzles operate on the exact same logic. You aren't solving abstract floating mini-games to open a door.
Thank goodness.
You're physically tracing heavy power cables through the mud to reroute electricity. You are tuning a broken radio to specific static frequencies to intercept Wolfpack patrols.
Hunting down physical keycards on the corpses of scientists.
Exactly.
It fundamentally forces you to slow down.
Yeah.
If you try to sprint through the southern lowlands like it's a traditional shooter, you will just die.
Very quickly.
You'll step into a localized static anomaly, your psychological endurance will instantly fray, you'll get a combat flinch, and a wraith will just drag you into the void.
You have to treat the environment with deep respect because it is actively trying to erase you.
So to pull all of this together, Lost Signals is just this immense, punishing journey. You start with nothing but a rusted knife, fighting off your own psychological decay and scavenging in the mud. You navigate the deeply flawed ideologies of the Wolfpack, the Ashborn, and the Primacy one, and it all culminates in this grand, tragic choice laid out by the arrogant architects of the past. Every bullet you save, every companion you keep alive, and every territory you shift literally changes the fabric of 2089.
It really is a masterclass in making the player feel the heavy burden of survival and the consequences of their actions.
It's amazing. So I want to throw a question out to you listening. If you were dropped into the choking ash and violet static of the southern lowlands, who would you trust?
That's the real question.
Would you hand over your hard-won nodes to the Wolfpack, trading your freedom for the safety of steel and barbed wire? Would you embrace the chaos of the Ashborn? Or would you walk the wastes entirely alone, clutching a dying soul saver to your arm and trust absolutely no one?
Man, that is the ultimate dilemma of the game. But before we sign off, I actually want to leave you with one final lingering secret buried in the deepest parts of the game's lore.
Oh, lay it on me.
So we spent a lot of time discussing B11 and L14, the true and the false Keystones. But if you read the most fragmented, corrupted Erebus logs, there are whispers of a third option.
Wait, really? A third option?
Yeah. A route known only as the Veil Path.
Okay.
It is an agonizingly difficult route that isn't marked on any map. It requires the player to completely bypass the faction wars, ignore both Keystones, and sacrifice almost every massive resource they've gathered to reactivate a series of ancient Edomite spires.
Wow.
It doesn't save humanity by flying them off-world, and it doesn't doom them. It directly contains the Vehemoth threat, sealing the quantum ruptures from the inside.
By sacrificing everything.
Exactly. It requires giving up the ultimate power the architects left behind. If the factions are deeply corrupt and the architects were blinded by their own arrogant hubris, well, maybe the only true victory in a broken world is taking the path of sacrifice that absolutely no one else is willing to walk. Something to think about.
A path no one else is willing to walk. Choosing to carry that heavy concept player through the wasteland, not to play a song, but to finally shut down the bleeding signal once and for all. That is incredible. Until next time, keep your eyes on the static.